Yo, 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 yo. I saw you cat today, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doing a meet and greet.
Did you record that?
Yes.
G'day, guys. Welcome back to the Drewzy channel. I've got Jesse on today, and we're talking about football. That's what we do best, Jesse. How you doing, buddy?
Good, mate. Well prepared for this video. Didn't forget about it. Not hungover. Let's do it.
Trying to get back into the loop. Well, at least I am. You're posting every day. But I want to dial in on my area of expertise, which is really the Freo Dockers. You're a West Coast fan, so I thought we'd have a bit of a WA footy chat today and talk about both of our teams. Your team coming off the best year in your history, in my opinion. How are your club doing?
Good, man. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for asking. Yeah, nobody's asked me that in a while. Coming off a struggling season, some mitigating factors and some really just inexplicably poor form. So I can't wait to sink my teeth into this, Drews.
And yeah, a weird year for Freo. Where do we currently sit? We're going to discuss through this. So we'll start with you, Jesse. Coming off last year, what do you actually expect for 2024 for your side? I think you've said it before, but this is properly the new generation of West Coast. Like Shuey's gone, Hearn's gone, Nick Nat's gone. All of those past legends of your club. Andrew Gaff still remains, but is a scrub. But other than that, it's pretty much a new generation. So what do you expect from this upcoming season?
Yeah, so I think all of our collective optimism as Eagles fans for this coming season is kind of predicated on, like, please no more injuries. Because it's easy to forget, and it does sound like really boring excuses for an outsider, and I get it. But at the same time, we went 2 years straight with having, like, 4 players outside the 22 fit at any given point. So, like, we can't really get excited until we get, at least a month or two into the season and we have normal injuries. And with that, I think we'll see improvement regardless. Like, obviously the problems were deeper than purely injuries last year. There's no doubt about that. But at least having some, like, the desired 22 out there and building towards a game plan again, being more competitive, like, that's what I'm expecting. But, if we start to see this injury numbers hit the same level, then it is going to be tough to really be invested this year, to be honest.
You do sort of enjoy those rebuilding years, though, a bit, I reckon. Like, you do appreciate it when you're shit and you start to get, like, a little bit better and you're like, yes, improvement. Whereas when you're, like, a club that's doing well and you have poor performances, you're like, I don't know. It's a different feeling going through a rebuild, and it's been a long time since you have. So,
yeah,
I think it's about time.
I think back on 2017 is probably one of the least, and 2021 is probably two of the least enjoyable years as Eagles fans, purely because we were just stuck in the middle, like, of the stanky part of the ladder, not playing well. No real exciting youth. Obviously, things ended up good in the following year after 17. By contrast, I genuinely feel excited for this year. Like, there's a lot to look forward to. But like I said, like, if it's a case of, like, we're playing with one hand tied behind our back with injuries, it's going to be really hard to get super interested. But, fingers crossed.
For Freo, I just expect a year, like, we just have to take that next step forward. Like, last year, we lost so much experience that I think we didn't realise how important some of the players in that 2022 season, which was a really successful year, were. Guys like Griffin Logue, Blake Acres, David Mundy, Rory Lobb, like 4 really experienced players on the list, mature players that probably guided that side through without really knowing. Obviously, guys like David Mundy and Griff Logue were massive at the club, but even just like a Rory Lobb and a Blake Acres, players that you probably don't think we really would have been affected by losing, like, probably just did have a bigger impact. And like, now our list demographic is a bit younger again. I think last year was a bit of a, we probably got a bit of ahead of ourselves. So this year I'm just expecting us to just play consistent football, like play our brand for 4 quarters. And that's all I can really expect. It's a cliche, play our brand of footy for 4 quarters. But yeah, I suppose we'll get on to, like, the areas of improvement. And the number one area of improvement for me is just that consistency, because we've shown in the past few years that our best footy does stack up. Like, we beat Geelong away every year. I don't think there's another club that can say they consistently win at GMHBA, although we've only won like 4 out of 11. Anyway, we've won our last 2 at GMHBA. Winning away at Sydney, that's a hard task. We play very good footy at times. Like, we took Brisbane right down to the wire in one of the last games of the season. So the quality is obviously there. But then there's games where, like against Collingwood, we had a 10-minute period where we conceded like 7 or 8 goals or something ridiculous and just lost the game in a period. Another one that comes to mind is the Bulldogs game. We were within a couple kicks and it was a really even contest. We were dominating the first half, and then, just fell to shit and they kicked 4 or 5 goals in a row and were out of the game. So those lapses in quarters and just like a consistent quarter-to-quarter effort will be the focus for this year. I think our footy stacks up. It's just bringing it consistently. What do you there's a lot of areas of improvement for West Coast, but other than injuries, where can we see improvement?
I think it's actually going to be a similar vein to what you just said there, because lapses for periods of games, there were games where we really never even got involved, but there were many periods throughout that season where we would just be not competitive, and I don't just mean lapses where we concede a lot of goals. I mean we just completely stop playing. And some of that is explained by the inexperience. I'm sure that's the case with Fremantle there, with a big gap between their best and their worst, and a lot of depth leave the club at the same time, like you said. But for us, it was a little bit too extreme. There would just be long periods of the ball racing out of the centre and the defence not even being able to stifle any of the inside 50s because it was coming in too hot too often. So I'd say lapses in games. I like to think that this might all be a trickle-down effect. I know this sounds lame to draw it back to injuries, but I think there's something to be said for if you have a better feel or greater feeling that you're going to win, you're going to try harder, as lame as that sounds. And I think with the Eagles, it was too many cases where, this game's cooked, so we're not going to try that hard. So yeah. I do like to think it's all a trickle-down effect, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that Sydney game in particular, you highlighted in your video, it literally looked like the players stopped running. It was just they'd given up. And that is probably the worst thumping I've ever seen. I was at Glastonbury that day, woke up, saw the Eagles score, absolutely buzzing.
It's going to be a good day.
Yeah, I think Freo beat Essendon, just a classic, result that no one cares about. Well done, Freo beat Essendon. I'm yes, Freo won. West Coast lost by 175 points, and I'm at Glastonbury. Let's go. Talking about being excited, who are you excited to see? Your top 3 players that you're most excited to see play for West Coast in 2024?
I'll start with the most basic, obvious one, and that's Harley Reid. It sounds like... I'm going to give you the cliche thing that comes out of every club, every pre-season, but it sounds like he's tearing it up in the pre-season. Now, he's done, aside from the actual fitness stuff, that's kind of Ruben Jimby, but Harley Reid in the competitive stuff and the match sim, it seems like he's really holding his own already, which is not a shock. But to throw a couple of others at you, I want to say Elijah Hewitt's probably my favourite of the young group there at West Coast. I think he's a little bit sidelined with injury to some extent, just catching up now, but I just want to see him play. And then probably Noah Long, probably one of those ones that outside of West Coast probably doesn't have too much of a profile yet, but very lovable, nifty sort of player that I think will be a long-term, potentially 300-game player. That's how good I reckon he is.
I'll say the 3 players I'm most excited to watch for the Dockers in 2024. For some reason, Jordan Clark, I feel like he is at that age now in his career where he's probably in his 5th or 6th season, and he's got to that sort of game milestone where he's a mature player. He's got the athleticism. I think he's a really driven player now as well. Probably one of the older players in the demographic of the group. I just think he is primed for a potential All-Australian squad push. That's a big call, but...
That is a big push. Is he a wingman or halfback flank? What's his future?
Half-back flank, I think, because we don't really have as much depth down back as we do in the midfield. We've got a lot of players that are competing for that spot on the wing and definitely inside. I think Jordan Clark is our next sort of Luke Ryan. I think they're very comparable. Jordan Clark's just more athletic. So I'd say Jordan Clark, number 1. Number 2, I've got to go with Jai Amos, just because he's such an exciting forward prospect. Kicked 41 goals last year, you were saying, Jesse. But he's just that forward that we've been crying out for so many years. So just getting to see him mature through another year. He's had a massive preseason. He's put on a lot of size. Had a really good game against Melbourne away, which we won. Another weird result. We beat Melbourne away at the MCG. As a second-year player, doing that at the MCG, a lot of good things to come in his career, and this year will be, really interesting to watch. And a third player, we'll chuck in Hayden Young as well, just because this year, we know what Hayden Young can do. It's a pretty basic answer, but he has completely pretty much shifted into the midfield. Hopefully injuries don't bring him back into defence, but seeing a full year of him playing on ball, the glimpses that we got last year were incredible. So yeah, I'd probably go with those 3. Those are the ones I'll be looking out for the most.
I do want to ask you something that I think is a really important question to answer for Freo. So, we talked about 7 players in 2022 who left the club, right? So in 2023, it did kind of continue a little bit, losing Lockie Schultz and Liam Henry. What are your thoughts on those losses and departures? Do you think that's a big loss? I think in particular, goals lost out of that Fremantle side is a big blow, and then also probably a wing spot is not completely simple to cover as well. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I 100% agree. Lachie Schultz, that was a heartbreaking one. But I think it sort of comes from a lack of respect in the back room at the club. Like, I think he was offered contracts that were really below what he was worth, and he was like top 5 in our BNF for consecutive years. Like, he was a heart and soul player. You could always rely on Lachie Schultz having a good game. Like, he's not one of those players that just has a quiet game. So that was a massive hit. And he would always be one of the first, like, you know, when you're writing out the forward line for Freo, Lachie Schultz is a guaranteed player on that list. So that's going to now be filled with like a Tom Emmett or like a Sam Sturr, but that's massive. Like, definitely our forward pressure will take a hit, and that's up to the younger players to step up and perform that role. So yeah, that does worry me, and it takes more experience out of the side. As for Liam Henry, that just pissed me off more than anything. Yeah, Liam Henry came through our academy. We pretty much carved out a position on our list specifically for him. We saw his talent coming through as a youngster, drafted him. Colton, I think, initially drafted him, and we matched their pick because he was in our academy. He's been pretty slow to come on, to be honest, as well. Like, his ball use and his work rate in his first couple years were really average. Tried to play him down forward a bit, didn't work, and he finally sort of started to find his feet last year. His body got used to the AFL, found that position on the wing, and then decides to leave. And I don't really understand for what reason. Like, the only reason I can really get is he wanted to get into fashion in Melbourne.
Yeah.
But, like, you're from WA, you've got guys like Michael Walters and Tendai Mzungu, Stephen Hill, like all these guys that have been set up like to help you and guide you through as a young athlete, as an Indigenous young athlete, and you just like pick up and leave to go to play at Marvel under Ross Lyon. It's like that one baffled me. I do think we have enough to cover Liam Henry on the wing. It just worries me what player he could be, because he started racking up the ball ridiculously, like just getting like 30 touch games and stuff like that. So I'd hate to see him become a really quality player. That one didn't hurt the soul as much as Lachie Schultz. Just made me angry.
Yeah, for sure.
So have a bit of talk about the derby. The last derby was the weekend that I moved to Manchester. I remember sitting on my bed in my new house, watching West Coast get absolutely pumped in a home derby. That just made the 20... I'm going to totally forget that happened. I remember watching the 2019 derby where West Coast won by 91 points. Who was that Indigenous forward you had for a couple years?
Jared Cameron, Charlie Cameron's little brother.
Yeah. I remember him just running amok and like shushing the crowd and stuff. And my family was over from England. It was like, yeah, let's go to the football. It was the derby. And we got pumped, and it was raining, and it was the worst. End of the Ross Lyon era.
Yeah.
Terrible. Like, that was the worst game. I was like, I hate this club. Well, I don't hate the club. I hate supporting this club. Times have changed. And yeah, that one last year, I felt like made up for that. Like a really emphatic win and a demoralizing loss for you. How do you see the derbies going this year? Because I'm actually excited for them, not just because I believe we'll win both of them, but the new midfield matchups are really exciting. Sarong, Brayshaw, and Hayden Young versus Harley Reid, Elijah Hewitt, and Ruben Jinby. That's like two gun young midfields. So yeah,
for sure.
What do you expect for these derbies this year?
Yeah, like I think certainly more competitive. It's funny to think, like, we talk about how demoralizing that derby was. I was watching that in Canada, and I was just like, yeah, they probably scrapes the top 5 worst losses of the year, so it wasn't quite maybe the same impact as that 2019 one on you. I don't know.
The year, bro.
Yeah, top 5. Yeah, probably. Maybe top 3 at a push. But
home derby losing by 105 points. That's only top 5.
Yeah, I think we were like maybe not winning at quarter time though. I remember we talked about this, and West Coast, I think we were at least probably playing with more intensity of the two teams, and then we just died. I don't know what happened there. But to answer your question, I think we should definitely be more competitive. Like, there's a big dichotomy between the first and second derbies of last year, and it was actually the first derby where a lot of those injuries hit. We had 7 injuries in that derby. Most of them, all of them were impact injuries. Oh, no, that's not true. But yeah, some of them were like 4-month injuries in that game. But for 3 quarters, we were at least, I'd say, matching it with intensity. Again, I don't remember the scorelines. But we were like not disgracing ourselves. So in my opinion, what my hope is that is the real West Coast that we see. Might not win either derby naturally, but if we're playing with that intensity, then we should give, people a half decent game in both games. And the second one's hard to explain. Like I said, like you start the game so well and then fall off a cliff. It's hard to get my head around that. But I'm hoping the first derby that we see is much closer to what we saw is much closer to what we'll get in 24.
That first derby was really weird. Like, Freo just did not... Like, it was like that North Melbourne game that we played. We just didn't get going. Like, our system just didn't work. It was like we were battling for every goal, scrapping for it. And West Coast, like, weirdly enough, were the more impressive side that day, I think. Just with all the injuries and how you managed to stay in the game. It wasn't an impressive win by Freo at all. But the second derby that we played... Yeah, you were up for it in the first quarter and then just fell off a cliff, like you said. Like, it was like you stopped trying again and it was just a procession from there. Does Adam Simpson get, like, how much more chance does Adam Simpson get to stay as West Coast head coach?
I think I err on the side of being a Simo supporter, I would say. Not massively, but just like I kind of tend to be loyal in that sense. So I'm optimistic for him. But the answer is still the contractual situation, I think, is probably going to save him a bit of time. Now, it might not buy him a whole extra year. He's got 2 years left on his contract, to be specific. I think if we're 10 rounds in and it's not improved from last year, then there's a chance he goes. But it would have to be seriously bad. But if we put in a 4 or 5 win season and our percentage is closer to around the 75% mark, I think that's kind of what people are expecting. And I imagine that's probably going to be enough to keep him, if that makes sense. So he needs a good injury run because it's getting to the point where if we have a bad injury run again, it's probably still not going to save him. He probably can't rely on that excuse. All
right, pass mark for West Coast. What are you saying?
I think if we have injuries, our expectations should be higher and therefore, 5 wins. I think that would be a pretty good improvement and a percentage of about 75% if we're talking objective criteria. And I think just eradicating, no losses over 70 points. Like that would be a bit of a win, to be honest. So we have no losses over 70 points for a bottom 2 side, probably.
I'd say Freo, the bare minimum has got to be... This isn't even an achievement, but I feel like 10th. Like, just don't be in the bottom half. I suppose if you're 10th, you are just in the bottom half.
Yeah.
But I think you got to finish... Yeah, you got to at least be in contention for finishing in the top 8 within the last round of the season. Like... There's a lot of good teams now. Like the league is in a really strong place at the moment. I remember a few years ago, the top 6 was like very clear of 7th and 8th. I think that was in 2020. Maybe it was
2021, I reckon.
Yeah. But now it's like, if you're in the top 8, you definitely deserve to be there. So it would be really tough to make the top 8. So I just want to make sure we're in that mix and hopefully, can play finals. But that'd be the pass mark for me. Around that finals contention.
Yeah, I agree with that on Freo. They're a pretty young side, and a jump up of like 4 spots on the ladder there, considering, 7 to 9 best 22 or best 25 players have left over the last few years. I think that's passable improvement, I agree.
There we go, a bit of WA footy chat. Thanks for joining me, Jesse. Man's on the True Footy channel. You know where he is. Anything you want to plug?
Nothing specific to plug, Drews. We're making daily content on the True Footy YouTube channel. If you want to see a bit of Drewzy's mug on there, he collabs with me every now and then. We do content together, so subscribe.
Thanks for joining me, Jesse.
Anytime.
If you want to help Drewzy get relevant again, hashtag get Drewzy relevant again. Leave a like on the video to help me in the algorithm. Subscribe if you're new, and the footy season is coming.
And all tag UCat so he collabs with us.
Anyway, we'll see you in the next video. Take care, you Broncos.